in Brussels that has been very, very bad for the United States. So, for example, when you see a European bureaucrat go after an American company.
Behind the cameras and the polished language of diplomacy, something else was exposed. A negotiation driven by ultimatums, military pressure, and a White House more focused on looking strong than making a real deal. We are anonymous. We do not serve presidents. We do not protect propaganda dressed up as policy. We follow the cracks in the official story, and when power tries to rewrite failure as strength, we reveal what was really said. So here is what happened. When Brett Baier asked J.D. Vance what went wrong in the Iran negotiations in Islamabad, Vance insisted that a lot had actually gone right. He said progress had been made, that the United States had clarified where it could be flexible, where it could accommodate, and what it absolutely needed in order for the president to feel like he was getting a good deal. He described the talks as significant, saying it was the first time in a long time that the Iranian and U.S. governments had met at such a high level under the current Iranian leadership. But even as he tried to frame the talks as progress, he admitted the real issue was whether Iran had enough flexibility to accept the critical U.S. demands. Then came the red lines. Vance said everything flowed from one principle: Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. He said Iran was willing to say that, but Washington wanted verification, not words. He laid out 2 points where he said the U.S. had no flexibility at all. First, the enriched uranium Iran currently possesses, what he called the dust, had to leave Iran completely, and the United States wanted control of it. He argued that Trump did not want to leave this problem to the next president or the one after that. Second, Iran had to lose the ability to enrich uranium in the future, because Vance said that was how Iran had gotten so close to a nuclear weapon before. He admitted the Iranians had made some progress and had moved in the U.S. direction, but he said they did not move far enough. So the decision was made: let them go back to Tehran, while the U.S. team returned to Washington. And that is where the real story begins, because Vance was not describing a normal compromise. He was describing a negotiation where Washington demanded that Iran surrender control over its enriched uranium, give up enrichment capacity, and accept those terms as non-negotiable. Iran's foreign minister later said the two sides had been inches away from a deal, but that the talks ran into U.S. maximalism and shifting goalposts. That matters, because while Vance accused Tehran of not going far enough, Tehran accused Washington of changing the terms as the process moved forward. When Baier asked whether more talks were coming, Vance said the ball was in Iran's court. But then he admitted something more revealing. He said the U.S. had learned something important about how Iran negotiates, and that this was ultimately why they left Pakistan. According to Vance, the Iranian team in the room was unable to cut a deal and had to go back to Tehran, possibly to get approval from the supreme leader or someone else for the terms Washington had set. That means the talks did not just fail because one side refused. They failed because the U.S. pushed terms the Iranian delegation may not have had the authority to accept. Vance tried to soften that by saying Trump would be happy if Iran were treated like a normal country with a normal economy, where its people could prosper and thrive. He said there was a grand deal to be had if Iran stopped pursuing a nuclear weapon and terrorism. But even that language exposed the problem. Washington was not speaking as an equal negotiating partner. It was speaking as if it alone could decide when Iran was normal. That is why these talks so often collapse. The Trump approach wraps coercion in the language of opportunity, offering peace with one hand and a threat with the other. Then the conversation turned to the Strait of Hormuz. Bayer asked whether reopening it fully was one of the red lines. Vance said yes. He said the U.S. had made clear that after offering a ceasefire and stopping the bombing, it expected Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. He said there had been some increase in traffic, but not enough, and warned that if Iran did not continue making progress, it would fundamentally change the negotiation. That shows these talks were never just about nuclear policy. They were tied to bombing, shipping routes, oil pressure, and control over one of the world's most important waterways. Bayer then cited the Iranian foreign minister's statement that Iran had negotiated in good faith during war and had encountered maximalism and shifting goalposts when the sides were inches away from an agreement. Vance responded by praising Pakistan's prime minister and leadership for mediating the talks. He then said that if Iran claimed they were inches away from a deal, that meant they had moved close to the U.S. position. He also said the Iranians were very different negotiators and repeated the U.S. bottom line. The enriched material had to come out of Iran, and Iran had to make a conclusive commitment not to develop a nuclear weapon. Then the pressure became even more explicit. Vance said the United States had the cards, the military advantage, and additional economic pressure through a blockade on Iranian oil coming out of the Strait of Hormuz. When Bayer asked how that blockade worked, Vance said it was not just Iranian-flagged vessels being stopped, but any vessel known to be going to or coming from Iranian ports. He said some ships would probably try to reflag themselves, but the U.S. believed it had strong intelligence on which ships were connected to Iran. He accused Iran of engaging in economic terror against the world by threatening ships in the strait, and said the U.S. would answer with a simple principle. If Iran was going to play that game, then Iranian ships were not getting out either. That is the contradiction at the heart of the whole strategy. Washington claimed to want the Iranian people to prosper while tightening military and economic pressure at the same time. Bayer also asked Vance about reports that he had been skeptical at the start and had told Trump so. Vance refused to discuss private advice to the president, but he said he 100% agreed that Iran could not have a nuclear weapon. He said the negotiations had shown him these were tough negotiators and the kind of people whose possession of a nuclear weapon would impose terrible costs on the entire world. In other words, whatever doubts he may have had, he publicly aligned himself completely with Trump's hard-line position. Before the interview ended, Bayer shifted to Hungary and asked Vance about campaigning for Viktor Orbán, who had just lost after 16 years in power. Vance said Orbán was a great guy, had done a very good job, and had left a transformational legacy. He said they knew there was the good chance Orbán would lose, but supported him anyway because he had stood up to Brussels and protected American interests. That moment may have seemed unrelated, but it revealed the broader worldview behind all of this: loyalty to strong men, hostility toward multilateral systems, and a style of politics that treats diplomacy as domination, not trust-building. So what is the real reason Vance left Iran talks without a deal? Because this administration tried to sell pressure as diplomacy. because Washington's demands were so rigid that even Vance admitted there was no flexibility on the core terms, because the U.S. concluded the Iranian team may not have had the authority to accept those terms, because Iran says the talks were derailed by maximalism and shifting goalposts, and because Trump's foreign policy style is always the same: project strength, control the headline, and let someone else deal with the consequences. Vance did not leave Islamabad without a deal simply because Iran refused. He left without a deal because the talks were trapped inside a framework of coercion, mistrust, and political theater from the very beginning. If you want more breakdowns like this, subscribe, share this video, and leave your thoughts below. Because when power sells you the polished version, we reveal the part they hoped you would never hear.